Hello children, and welcome to the Adventures of Tzar the Paddington Poodle Brahman Bull Encounter. So today we're going to start off and read chapter 1. Here's little Ziggy again, and he's going to help me do the book reading. We've got the Brahman Bull Encounter. What on earth was that? Screamed Tzar, as the loud explosion at the rear of the four-wheel drive sent it into a tailspin, hurling Ziggy and Tzar against the door. They dug their toenails into the leather seats as they fish-tailed up the road until the dad was able to bring the vehicle under control and finally to a stop. Sticking his head out the window, Tzar could see bits of black rubber strewn across the road. "Oh dear, I think we've left a back tyre there," he said, as he and the dad jumped out of the four-wheel drive into the searing heat to examine the damage. "Well, Tzar, what's the verdict?" Ziggy asked, craning his neck over the side of the window to get a better look. So here's one of our first images. So there it is, the four-wheel drive, and Tzar and Ziggy with their head out of there, looking at the bits of tyre. "It's not looking good, Zig. The black left tyre is blown to smithereens and one of the other tyres has bits of rubber hanging off it. I don't think we're going to be able to make it to Darwin tonight," he added, as he and the dad pulled out the one and only spare from the boot. "Bummer. The mum and I were looking forward to a bit of civilization." Ziggy quickly pulled out his tablet and downloaded an atlas of the Northern Territory and examined it closely. "Well, I have some good news. We're about half an hour from Cape Crawford, which, by the way, has a camping ground and some cabins at a place called the Heartbreak Hotel. Looks like a good place to stop for the night, so toes crossed they have a vacant cabin, because if they don't, there is nothing around for another 500 kilometres. By the way, Tzar, did you know that the Lost City was around here? I'm really surprised that we were going to drive right by and not explore it." "Yes, as a matter of fact, I did, but you can only see the rocks from the air, and I knew you wouldn't be up for a helicopter ride. There, that's the last of the nuts on the tyre tightened." "Oh, helicopter, I see," said Ziggy, suddenly turning pale. "Cape Crawford is located at the edge of the western coastline of the Gulf of Carpentaria, about 700 kilometres southeast from Darwin and 3,165 kilometres from Sydney. It is home to ancient towering rock formations known as the Lost City, an outcrop of natural-sized skyscrapers and a must-do for travellers and adventurers like Tzar, Ziggy and their folks." "Thank goodness we're here," said Tzar, as the four-wheel drive limped into the grounds of the famous Heartbreak Hotel. Its lush green grounds were stark contrast to the arid terrain that immediately surrounded the site. Elegant and debonair, Tzar is a giant French black poodle, fearless adventurer, an animal and conservationist, and a bit of a poodle detective. From the highlights on top of his head to the tips of his tail, he is considered the coolest dog around. Ziggy, his brother, is the cutest, tiny, toy red poodle and barely comes up to Tzar's knee, but what he lacks in size makes up for presence. Stylish and graceful, the two poodles turn heads wherever they go. Isn't that right, Ziggy? So here's a picture of Tzar and Ziggy out in the desert. Isn't it lovely? It's still Zig. In their haste to get away from the burning sun, they hadn't noticed the family of frilled-necked lizards who were sprawled out on the soft grass having a late afternoon siesta under the tree's gigantic canopy. Scared out of their wits at the sight of the poodles, the lizards scattered in every direction, their beautiful coloured frills of every imaginable shade of ochre, brown, red and purple madly flapped as their back legs crazily pedalled them to safety. "Did you see those lizards run?" said Ziggy, rolling around in the soft grass and kicking his little legs in the air. He laughed hysterically until the tears rolled down his little face and evaporated, sucked up by the soaring heat. "I've never seen anything quite like it, have you? Isn't that what you said, Ziggy, baby?" "Oh my goodness, I can't stand this heat. When is it ever going to stop?" yelped a listless and overheated Tzar. His long pink tongue hung limply from the side of his mouth, and his belly rapidly rose and fell like it was a bagpipe being played at a Scottish Highland gathering. Desperately trying to cool himself down, he stretched out his lean torso on the green grass and croaked, "I want air conditioning," looking longingly at the four-wheel drive. "Stop your whinging, I'm hot too," replied Ziggy, wiping the sweat from his tiny brow with his perfectly coiffed paw. "So? Well, you could have stayed back in Sydney with Coco and the auntie, and it's way cooler than out here." Coco was Tzar and Ziggy's best friend and was a giant French poodle just like Tzar. "Like that was ever going to happen," Tzar replied, rolling onto his back and stretching his perfectly manicured feet in the air. Gazing up, he could see that the lizard had climbed the tree and found refuge in one of its branches. He watched them watching him, and it wasn't long before the poodles were drawn into a deep sleep. "Dad, what on earth are they?" Aegon asked, pointing to the two poodles snoring their heads off below. Aegon was a handsome frilled-necked lizard and was with an abnormally large red, ochre and green frill that was covered in purple spots. And here, children, we've got Aegon and Saurus. Aegon had been different from the other frilled-necked lizards. Quite apart from his unusual frill, he was exceptionally curious, mischievous, and he loved all kinds of adventure. He was always getting into scraps, and his father was always bailing him out. "They sort of look like dogs, but different." "Well, I'm not sure, son," replied his father, a large, handsome specimen of a lizard called Saurus. Saurus's frill was a blend of yellow and fawn with a splatter of tiny brown spots at the edge. "Yes, they kind of look like dogs," he added, peering down to get a better look at the sleeping poodles. Aegon and Saurus had certainly come across plenty of dogs, mostly coolies, dingoes, and a few cattle dogs, but these creatures, they were something else. "I've just got to meet those beasts," Aegon whispered to himself. He soon found himself struggling to keep his eyes open, and it wasn't long before he too nodded off. As night crept into the campsite, the cool evening air brought with it some relief for the heat-drained travellers. Ziggy was woken by the loud chatter from a pair of Horsfield's bronze cuckoos sitting on a branch just above his head, discussing what they were going to have for dinner. He stretched his neck to release the crick that had crept into it, yawned, and extending one leg at a time till they were fully awake, "Yay!" he meandered over to join his folks and left Tzar sleeping peacefully. Aegon, also woken by the cuckoos, peered below, taking in Ziggy's every movement. "Well, it walks like a dog, it has teeth like a dog," he muttered to himself. He monitored Ziggy's movements. He could smell perfume wafting up from Ziggy's fur, the scent of the conditioner he was bathed in just that morning. "Well, you don't smell like a dog, so what are you?" he reflected, scratching his head in bewilderment. Disappointed that the opportunity to meet the poodles hadn't presented itself, he decided to wait until after dinner, when everyone was settled for the evening, and go right up to them and introduce himself. He had a good feeling about these beasts, so he settled himself on a branch and kept an eye open for the right moment to present itself. Tzar was yanked out of his slumber by the screeching sound of hundreds of olive-backed orioles out on their nightly flight. Startled, he jumped to his feet and looked up at the offenders. But any feeling of animosity immediately evaporated as he watched them swirl around the evening sky, diving and ducking like a perfectly choreographed dance movement. He looked around for Ziggy and noticed that he was alone, save for the frilled-necked lizard he'd seen earlier on that day. "I wonder where everyone is," he asked himself, his eyes scanning the campsite for a familiar face. Delectable smells wafted past his sensitive nose, bring his attention back on himself, and his belly let out a big rumble like an Outback road train travelling at full speed, and he realised he was hungry. His eyes and nose followed the aroma, and he finally spotted the gang fussing over dinner just a few metres away. I'm just in time for dinner, he croaked excitedly, spotting the white tablecloth and the perfectly set table. He slowly ambled over to the campfire to help Ziggy find Dad and the camp oven. Isn't that right, Zig? What's for dinner, Zig? Tzar asked, his greedy eyes scanning the table. Good evening, Tzar, baby. Your timing is perfect as always, Ziggy replied, leaning up and giving Tzar a big kiss on the lips. It's your favourite, as a matter of fact. Crowned roast, baked potatoes, and roasted vegetables. Vegetables? Yuck! Just give me the steak. What are you, the armed guard? He said as he watched Ziggy proudly escort the dad, the roast and the vegetables to the dining table. Dinner is served, announced the dad. Instantly, saliva spurted to the poodle's lips, as if their gums had sprung a leak, and they impatiently tapped their toes on the ground as the mum dished up their food. Tzar's plate had barely enough time to hit the ground before he pounced on it, sinking his teeth into his juicy steak. Closing his eyes, he chewed slowly, savouring every morsel, until finally he could not eat one more mouthful. With full bellies, he and Ziggy found a cosy spot by the campfire and laid back to watch the folks play card. Well, I must say, the dad outdid himself tonight, said Ziggy, licking a crumb from that was clinging to the hair on his side of his mouth. You're not wrong, that was delicious, replied Tzar, flossing the bits of meat that had wedged themselves between his teeth with a sturdy stick he found lying next to him. I wonder what the dad will cook us up for tomorrow night. Let's have a look at them. Let's have a look at them flossing their teeth. See, they're flossing their teeth. All right, Ziggy, you in a hurry to go somewhere? We haven't finished yet, darling. I don't know how you could possibly think of food after what we've just eaten, he chortled, stretching his bloated belly into a more comfortable position. It wasn't long before Tzar felt his eyelids getting heavy with sleep, so he decided to take himself off to bed and quietly slipped away, slinking into the comfort of his sheepskin rug. Good night, all, he whispered, as the gentle hum of their voices rocked him to sleep. Not long after Tzar had gone to bed, Ziggy and the mum and the dad also called it a night and slipped under the blankets, and once again Agon had missed his chance to meet the poodles. With a big sigh, he settled on a branch and promptly fell asleep too. So children, that's chapter 1 of the Brahman Bull Encounter. Tomorrow, at the same time, at 4 p.m, we will bring to you chapter 2. Until then, have a happy sleep and see you tomorrow. Bye.